Makao Goebel here with the Overtime Heroics MMA podcast. We got our Scottish brother, Cameron Wilson, in the house.
How you doing?
We got Nick Moroso.
How's
Sorry
everyone?
if I fucked up your name.
You all right, brother?
All right. We just saw an amazing card, UFC's first card on ABC. And let's jump right back into it with Austin Lingo versus Kilburn. That guy, Lingo, had some crazy power. But what impressed me the most about him was his technique. His opponent kept trying to take him down, and Lingo was there with the defense the whole time. I think he had a 93% takedown defense rate, which is phenomenal, seeing that the guy probably tried to take him down almost like 10 times. So amazing right there. He also had some crazy power. He dropped the guy, I think, 2 times in the first round. He showed some beautiful Muay Thai game. Anything you guys want to add on to that?
I missed that fight.
There's one thing I'd like to add, basically to what you were saying about the wrestling. I think he's another well-rounded, fundamentally sound fighter, and yeah, like you were saying, he's got the power. But he, one thing I really noticed from him was, like you were saying, fundamental wrestling. Whenever he'd be against the cage, he'd make sure to get the right tie-ups, turn him with the underhook, get back on the right side of the cage. Whenever he'd get in his legs, he had good hips. He had, like, strong hips, good tie-ups. He'd always get it back. And when he got taken down, he got back to the feet. Austin Lingo, impressive.
Yeah, I think that guy's going to have a lot of potential. Anyone know what weight class that was at? It's slipping my mind right now.
I want to say 55, maybe?
55. He's got a lot of potential. I mean, there's going to be a lot of fun matchups the UFC can put him in. When a guy's well-rounded like that with a lot of power and he's not putting himself – he didn't really put himself in danger either was something that impressed me because sometimes when people have a lot of power like that, and I think it was also his debut, and a lot of people might try and see they got that guy hurt and empty the gas tank or leave that chin a little outstretched because they're so confident. But he really kept a really smart technical approach on that fight. Next up on the card, we had Melo versus Moraes. That was a beautiful fight. Well, it wasn't too beautiful. I'll let Cameron go on. Actually, no, Nick, I'll let you go first with this one. Sorry about that.
Oh, you're good. This one, I feel like, drew the ire of a lot of the internet, and I don't really know what people were expecting. Sometimes with prelim fights, you're just going to get 2 people that can't quite find their range with each other, or with any fighter for that matter, you know? But it wasn't the best look for the women's 135-pound division ever, but I'd caution people out there not to give up on the division because there's still some exciting fights towards the top. And like any other, I'm sure there'll be some exciting prospects coming down the pipes. Yeah, it wasn't the best fight ever.
Yeah, Moraes came out with that Holly Holm approach. She had the loud karate hiyas in there. But the only difference is her kicks were pretty sharp like Holmes. Didn't see a lot go to the head, but the thing that was a lot different was her jab was missing. I think it was almost like 80% of the time she was missing her strikes. So it was like she was coming forward with the high odds, and it was just hitting air. Her opponent, I wish I could have seen a lot more straight punches from her. She was really winging these big hooks and overhands. And she actually caught Moraes a couple times and opened her up, busted her up pretty badly. Another thing I would have liked to see out of Moraes more was her footwork seemed to be a little lacking. She was doing okay at certain points and heading her off, but there was certain situations in the cage where I think if she had took more of a sharper angle or more of a outward angle, she could have really kind of had her cornered. And then that's when she could have came with the big looping hooks and overhands and actually caught her. But it seemed to be that she would be she would miss those jabs from Moraes, and then she would throw back with the big overhand or looping hook, and Moraes would just circle out the whole fight.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Adding to that, I think Vanessa Melo definitely could have had a better outcome if she would have, because she was sitting down on the rear hook she was throwing nicely, right? If she straightened it up a little bit and turned it into a cross and sat down on the punch the same way, and maybe stepped in, because it was, if I remember correctly, a southpaw versus orthodox matchup. And since it was an open stance, I think if she would have stepped to the dominant angle, like outside of the lead foot, if she would have been more aggressive about taking the lead foot positioning, I think she could have found a home for the left hand.
100%. One fight that didn't really matter where anyone's feet was Tafa and Felipe.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, man, let's let Cameron start off with that one. Cameron, what was your thoughts on that fight?
Well, usually I'm a big, I don't know, I'm a big flyweight kind of guy. So I'm always, if a heavyweight comes on, that's usually the smoke break fight or the food break fight for me. But I thought I quite liked Tafa. I'll give this one a go. Felipe's, he's quite fun. He works the body quite a lot. That's fun to see. And the two of them literally stood right in the middle, almost head to head, for the best part of 15 minutes and tried to kill each other. Tafa is like a, younger version of Mark Hunt. He just seems to be, I don't know, he's got that style towards him. He throws some nice kicks, but not many. He usually relies on his hands, and Hunt was quite the same. He had the nice kick in him, but his hands were his big weapon. Felipe, I expected more. I thought Felipe would have been more, I don't know, I thought he was a more technical fighter going into it, so I thought we might have seen Felipe work the body, really wear Tafa down, but I thought Tafa done really well with the majority of, Felipe's attacks. I thought covering up, I thought he'd done most of the work just by, simple blocking, and it wasn't like he was making, Felipe wasn't making him, work for it. He wasn't making him, change angles. He wasn't making him try and step into the pocket and duck under a shot. He was kind of just hitting him in the same shots over and over again and hoping it worked.
Nick, what are your thoughts on it?
I saw similar things as Cameron did with Felipe. But about Justin Tafa, I like his game. He's like another guy that's a shorter heavyweight that uses the shorter fighter versus taller fighter tactics really well. There's a bunch of examples throughout history of guys like that. Like, you got Mike Tyson in boxing, obviously, Mike Zambitis in Muay Thai, Gokhan Saki in heavyweight kickboxing. Shorter guys that land these big hooks and smaller guy tactics against taller fighters. And I think Tafa does a really good job of that. So I always like watching him fight.
Yeah, my biggest takeaway from that fight, I think, would have to be Felipe really seems to have almost a lack of footwork kind of when he's got his back to the cage. It seems like he doesn't have a full grasp of the clinch, because it seems like one of the themes we saw in the fight with Yorgan De Castro was De Castro was holding him up against the fence and just kind of pounding on him. And there was a certain couple spots where Tafa was doing that to him. And I've seen a little bit of improvement, because I think Felipe actually reversed it at a couple different occasions. But it was kind of useless, though, because they'd either split up and go back into the phone booth throwing strikes, or Tafa would just push Felipe back to the cage again. Something that really impresses me with Felipe is his boxing. He's got some really good jabs, some really good straights, but what really impresses me the most is the way he transitions from the head to the body and back again.
I agree.
It's very beautiful to watch, and whoever his boxing coach is doing a great job with him, because you could tell he's really hurting people too, because a couple different occasions when he was slipping from the head to the body and back and forth, his big hooks were really hurting Tafa bad. His hooks in general are just very nice. I think he busted up Tafa's eye super bad with just a straight punch or maybe a hook, and it seemed like he could barely see out of it the whole fight, and then it was really bothering him. One thing I really would have loved to see out of Tafa is I feel like he got lured into a brawl when he was the more technical fighter.
100% agree.
Yeah, I think the reason he lost that decision is because when he was getting forehead to forehead, he was getting beaten up to the body, a lot of volume by Felipe, and he would come back with a 2 or 3 strike combo and maybe land a couple of the punches. But I think the judges were really looking at, the volume output is kind of the same. The men are throwing the same amount, but who's landing the harder, more significant shots? And I think Felipe's body work really did it for him in securing him that win. Although I didn't agree with it. I thought Tafa had done enough because his combos were fluid enough that they were landing. I thought he had hit Felipe more in that last round than vice versa. But I'm not a judge, and they gave Felipe the fight. If
I'll
I'm
be
Tafa, I'm looking at that fight, and I'm saying to myself, okay, I got pulled into his fight. You know, Felipe's a brawler. He's kind of like a Nate Diaz. Pressure. Let's get in each other's faces and throw down. And Tafa really could have used his footwork to keep him at range and almost not pick him apart, but he could have tried, though.
I completely agree. You should have tried to manipulate the distance a little bit more because I agree. I think he was the superior fighter as far as footwork goes. And I think you could have played that up more.
Cameron,
I fell
what do
into
you
the trap of thinking Tafa wasn't as technical. So I hadn't really watched too much of him other than I think the last of like 2 minutes of one of his fights. So I went into that thinking, right, I've seen Felipe a few times. He should, have too much for him. And I was really, really impressed. I came away thinking, Tafa should have this relatively comfortably in the decision. I thought it was one of those, every round was close, but I thought every round was relatively decisive, if that makes sense. It was close enough, but it was not quite that you could have debated it. I had Tafa, I'm sure it was 2-1, and I was so certain of it as well, like so certain.
And now with 2 big wins for Carlos Felipe right there, back to back, what do you guys see next for this young heavyweight prospect? And also on the flip side, where do you think Tafa goes from here? I don't know how many consecutive losses this is, but I believe he is under consecutive losses at this point now.
I'd like to see Tafa against Greg Hardy. Hardy's coming off of a loss. They tried to put him into the rankings. It didn't quite work. He wasn't ready. Tafa's not ready for that yet, but it's too, with Tafa having Mark Hunt in his corner, he's got that kind of power going. If he can get a bit of a momentum going, he'll have some fans. He's got a camp, he's got a country that, gets behind their fighters. I think he would smash Greg Hardy as well, without any disrespect. I think Tafa would do horrible things to Greg Hardy.
I don't know, though. I don't know, because we saw Greg Hardy against Tybura look like a completely different striker. I mean, his ground game aside, his ground game aside and his cardio aside, if you talk about the technique and the fluidity, that's something that he didn't really have his first couple fights. He was just kind of this big guy that if he hit you, you were probably going to be put to sleep. But now he's really kind of looking like a kickboxer. But that's a fight that I'd love to see also. I think for Felipe, maybe a big fight with, what's the name? Tybura. Maybe Tybura and Felipe. I think Felipe is kind of far away from that, though. I don't know what ranking Tybura is, but I think he might be in the top 15, maybe closer to 10. And I know Felipe is probably an unranked fighter at this point. He's relatively new, so it might be a lot for Felipe because Tybura is a pretty gritty veteran. But what do you think, Nick?
I'd like to see the Tybura fight. It's a pretty interesting matchup. I had another one that I thought was kind of up the rankings and far off that was an interesting matchup as far as I'd like to see him against the loser of Cyril Gane and Jairzinho Rozenstruik maybe. I mean, that's a big jump in the rankings, but maybe after – I don't know. I guess the real question is, do you think he cracks the top 15 after beating Tafa?
Not yet.
I don't think
he's got a wee bit to go yet. I think his next fight might be against someone that's right on the edges of the top 15 or someone on a winning streak looking to get into it. I think we've seen enough to be impressed. I don't think we've seen enough to properly, say, okay, he's top 15, he deserves that yet.
Yeah.
I think
I'm with you.
Another up-and-comer.
I'm with you.
Well,
I like that too.
Next fight on the card, it was the prelims main event. It was Edwards and Yanan. What did you boys think about that? Cameron, we'll start off with you.
I expected a lot more going forward from Edwards. I thought she was going to be a lot more aggressive. I think, I don't know, that's maybe just because of her last fight ending as brutally as it did. Or was it her last one or the one before it? Back last year, late summer, I think it was. I honestly thought because of that she was going to come out like a house on fire, and I don't know. I felt like there was more to. I thought she had a lot more to give. I thought she was holding back. Maybe nerves. I don't know. I just thought there was a wee bit more from her to come. I think she's a better striker than we've seen, and her grappling was better than I thought. But I don't know. I expected more from her.
Nick?
I'm kind of in the same boat as Cameron, but I do think she showed a lot of potential, and if she proves the defense on the feet and improves the grappling, she could definitely be a factor in the future, just based off of like innate talent.
Yeah, I got to agree with you too. I was expecting a lot more from Wu Yanan. I can't remember who she faced before Edwards, but it was another Asian fighter, and it was a war. I can't remember if Yanan won or not, but I know that I thought she did. That sounds stupid, but she had a lot of output, though, in that fight that I saw with that other Asian fighter. And I was expecting improvement because of her age, and she's new into her MMA career, but it almost looked like she took a step back with that Edwards fight because it seems like she just got controlled in spots that I don't want to say that she shouldn't have, but she got controlled on the ground and things like that. But anyways, moving on though, let's talk about something that was a real banger. Punahele Soriano and Dusko Todorovic. Dusko Todorovic lost that O. What do you boys think? Nick, we'll start off with you.
All right, with me, at first, I mean, I feel like I had the same thought that everybody did when that fight started. I was like, oh, he's leaning that far back and leaning shit that far in the air. How long is this gonna work? And whenever you see someone doing that, you go, is this creative movement and like lean back gonna take them all the way to the end of the fight, or are they gonna get punished for leaving their chin in the air, right? And we all know what happened with that. When he got punished for leaving his chin in the air, it happened rather abruptly. I was shocked by how well he could take a shot. I think everybody thought that fight was going to get stopped earlier than it was. And at the end, I know Punahele Soriano mentioned that Todorovic was in on his legs at the end of it. I don't think that made the stoppage a bad stoppage, but he was. It was a big testament to his toughness, but the guy we're to talk about here, Soriano, I mean, he threw in takedown feints, mixed in takedown feints with the left hand. I mean, that's going to be huge for any wrestler trying to transition into being an effective striker, and obviously has lights out power. I think we'll see more from him in the future. I haven't seen enough of his like offensive wrestling and grappling to have a whole idea of his game, but I mean, obviously nuclear left hand. I'd like to see more.
Cameron?
I missed the first, I don't know how long, I missed the first wee bit and I came back in, seen him get hurt, and then I seen him get stopped. And I was like, all right, well, I thought I was sitting in for a decent 3-round fight here and it's stopped before I can see anything. All I can say is that the Soriano looked powerful. He looked huge though. Like, he looked massive. I do wonder how he would cope in a 5-round fight or even a really grueling 3-round fight that's going to take, maybe one that has a lot of his takedowns blocked, a lot of his, strikes kind of whiffing off and missing. I do wonder how that size is going to play a factor in, cardio.
Yeah, we do see that being a problem with some power strikers. It's like a kryptonite to them is something called cardio. And we haven't really seen Punahele pushed like you were just saying. So that will be interesting to see. Punahele to me is just I'm hopping on the hype train and I'm taking command of it. I think this kid is going to be a star. I think he's the next – I don't want to say he's the next Max Holloway because that's a lot to put on his shoulders, but I think he's the next big name out of Hawaii. Hawaii's been needing a big name. After BJ Penn, we were searching. We found Max Holloway. And then – because BJ Penn, yeah, is from Hawaii. All right, I thought I was going to be stupid for a second. But anyways, we found Holloway.
Quick shout out to Ty Guarda, another up-and-coming Hawaiian that's been on here a few times already. So
that's our boy. That's going to be the next big name, big Hawaiian name for Bellator right there. That kid has massive potential.
Striking is frightening, so powerful.
And the heart grittiness, too, of that kid is just something to admire. And that's a big thing in these Hawaiian fighters is the heart and the grittiness. We saw it with Max against Poirier. We see it with BJ Penn in his fights, his wars that he's had over the years. That's the big question with Punahele, though, back to him is, Does he have that heart? Does he have the grittiness? Can he keep up his offense and defense through 5 rounds, or even a hot, fast-paced three-rounder? But I will say quickly before we move on, though, I think Dusko Todorovic is also has a lot of potential. I think he's a great prospect as well. But I think this kind of showed that his striking may not all be there yet.
I agree.
I think, like Nick was saying, instead of using his footwork to get him out of those situations and dodge those punches, he was using his head. And that's a problem because footwork with head movement, and you are hard to hit. But with just one, though, it's pretty easy to hit you.
He put himself in some bad positions, got his feet crossed.
He did. But speeding up, though, let's glance over to Chirico and Buckley. All I got to say is wow. Nick, we'll let you go.
Okay, so Joaquin Buckley actually trains in my state, and so that's an interesting one for me. But, I mean, what else can you say? The biggest favorite on the card got head kicked in the first round, and there was no questioning whether it was out. I mean, there's not a lot to say about the fight, so I'll keep it brief. I liked the strategy of Alessio De Chirico, just kind of trying to keep a kick-heavy game plan, kick him up high, tie up the hands, kick him he threw the inside leg kick a couple times. This fight was an open stance matchup too, meaning southpaw versus orthodox. So the inside leg kick came open, and I saw him going to that early and kicking different levels, which I think is huge and would have contributed to success if the fight didn't end there. But I mean, what can you say? He conditioned Buckley to think the kick was coming right around the arms, and then turned his hip over and wrapped his shin around his head. It was classic Muay Thai. It was beautiful. I mean, it was an amazing finish. Good on Alessio De Chirico, and I hope to see a lot more of it because it was a beautiful knockout.
Cameron?
I don't mean to sound like a know-it-all, but I've been waiting for Buckley to get head kicked. He's got that weird bouncy ducking and weaving Mike Tyson style, and it's the whole time I've been looking at it thinking the highest level striker he's fought's Holland, not a kicker. Does throw kicks, not really to knock you out though. Holland's kicks are similar to Conor in a sense, they're more for positioning. I think the minute he came up against a big kicker, it was going to happen, someone that could kick, because he's constantly ducking and weaving, and whilst that works in boxing, I don't feel like it works in MMA. There's too much in boxing. You can't get caught with a knee, you can't get caught with a kick, and I feel like his kind of stance for getting out of the way shots is very, very boxing heavy, and it's something he might need to adapt. It does work, but not to the level that he uses it. You need to mix it up with other things, because the next person he fights, if they're a kicker, they're probably going to catch him and at least rock him again unless he gets them out of there early.
Yep, and there's a couple fighters that share that same tendency. Robert Whittaker is another one. He's always leading with that head. He uses his head to add to the momentum of his strikes, and that's how he got dropped by Till. And it's just like DC, his head moving off to the left, I believe, always. And that's how he got hurt by Stipe. But moving on, though, someone who hurt someone, Jing Lang and Ponzi. Wow. I mean, that straight followed with the hook, just put him out. Cameron, I'll let you take this one.
Without being, too rude, I done this fight as a preview. This is one I covered, and I thought Ponzi, if he's anywhere near the same fighter, should have walked this fight. It shouldn't have been too competitive. They're two very, very similar fighters, although Ponzi 2 years ago is just a little bit better everywhere. He's better with his kicks, he's better with his hands, he's more powerful, but I don't know, he seems so slow, he seemed sluggish, he seemed gun shy as well, but he was kind of half throwing punches and then he was leaving his head open. He wasn't fully committing to things, which I think led to the hook that caught him. He kind of lunged in and didn't fully finish the combination he was going for, and it left him kind of retreating with his hands down and his his chin high, and it kind of left a Bisping Rockhold kind of knockout from what's it called, Bleach there. I just feel like Ponzi was so disappointing, but he's had 2 years off, so it's completely understandable as well.
Yeah, Nick, what do you think about it?
I had kind of the same take. I was expecting Ponzinibbio's footwork and jab and kicks to take it. I honestly was really surprised. But, I mean, oh, my God. He threw that left hook with unbelievably bad intentions. That's all I have to say about that fight. Everybody watched it. Very impressive.
I will add before we move on, another thing that really impressed me was those feints. He kept doing it's almost like shadow box feints. You're just throwing your combos without even really throwing them. But then when you mix in actual head fake and actually throw it, that's when you start to catch people because you're conditioning them to see it coming. And then when it's actually coming, it's a whole different game. And we saw it with Ponzi last night. Those feints are real and they will set you up. So you got to be careful for those traps. Speaking of traps and beautiful grappling, Condit and Brown, I mean, this is the third time these guys are fighting. Every single time they bring it. And I mean, I think all of the fans were pleased with this one. And they did show off some amazing grappling too for all those grappling fans out there. Nick, what do you think about it?
Was it not the first?
For
Sorry,
me,
quickly, was it not the first time they fought? But it's been booked 3 times.
I think
Oh.
so.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yep,
I
I'm
think
probably
it was
wrong.
the first time, and they've been booked 3 times. So it was
I
like
think
third
they
time they're
fought.
booked.
I think they fought because I remember them showing like an old highlight of Condit hitting Brown with the elbow, and I think he knocked him out. Unless it was like someone else. I don't know. We need a fact checker.
No,
We need a Jamie.
they've not fought before. First time.
Wow.
Twice they were booked before, and it fell through.
Wow. Well, the editor that made my notes is getting fired, boys. No, no, but seriously though, what'd you think about that, Nick?
Me specifically, I'm a huge Matt Brown fan, so I know his game pretty well. One thing I've noticed from Matt Brown as he ages is he's become incredibly technical with the Muay Thai and the grappling. Like, if you watch Matt Brown's style, it's almost like you're watching a stadium Thai fighter tactics adapted to mixed martial arts because he's always throwing kicks and trying to, like, manipulate the guard and hand trap and throw elbows. And he hit a really nice hand trap right elbow on Condit at the beginning of the second, I believe. I'm pretty sure he, like, pulled down his left glove and just stuck the elbow in, like, over. And that was nice. It stunned him. But I'd say what I was talking about him being, like, a stadium Thai fighter is he'll clinch. Like, he'll clinch and then go to the takedowns, right? So he's kind of, like, clinching against good punchers and kicking against good punchers and just opting away from the hands. But yeah, I thought even though he, like, lost the fight, it's interesting. It's always interesting to watch him fight at this point in his career because he's really technical. And I thought the switch kind of hit in the middle of the second round to get on top, and, like, it was beautiful.
Cameron, what about you?
How did you guys score the fight? I had Condit all 3 rounds. I thought the first round you could argue for Brown, but I don't think he done anything. I think Condit outstruck him, and then he switched him at the end and ended up on top.
Yeah, even when he was on the bottom, Condit was landing some hits too. So I agree with you. I had all 3 for Condit as well.
And
Me
then
too.
in the third, the only time Condit ended up on bottom was when he went for a triangle, and Matt Brown physically had to just, straighten his back and not let himself get pulled in, and he genuinely looked exhausted. I think Carlos Condit went in there and really showed that he's been working on all aspects of his game. He's not ready to, just fade away into the backlight like some guys do at his age. He is still, I think, a legit fighter. I don't think he'll ever get to, top 8, top 7 again, but I think Condit might have another good few, 3 or 4 wins and have another wee win streak before we see things properly start.
And he's a free agent now too, if we get to that. But on to the main event. It was my birthday present from the UFC and Max Holloway. And favorite fighter, favorite sport on my birthday. What more could I ask for? But, I mean, from the first round was probably the most competitive one out of all of them, in my opinion. Even going through that first round, though, you could see the odds starting to tilt in Max's favor. And you could see the volume just picking up as he started to get in that groove state more and more, and that flow state, I should say, and just landing his combos. And that's the thing about Max, is his boxing has always been great. people have kind of started to sleep on it, and they said, one of my friends, Scottish friends, said that Kattar might be the better boxer, but I think we saw that wasn't the case. Anyways, though, another thing I'll say before I pass it on is Holloway's game is continuing to improve. He's only 29, and look what he's accomplished so far in his career. And we could be possibly seeing 6 or 7 more years out of this guy. If you really want to get crazy, you could say another decade easily. But another thing before I give it off to Zach or Nick, though, is the kicks he was slipping in was beautiful. I think Nick said earlier that his teeps and side kicks to the legs was a very, very beautiful new addition to his game. His elbows that he was throwing was beautiful. That lead-in elbow was amazing. It found the mark a couple times. The knees, that was beautiful. We're seeing a lot of improvements out of Holloway. Nick, what'd you think?
Adding to the improvements, I would say definitely the teeps and side kicks to the thighs were a nice new wrinkle, and I thought it worked perfectly against Kattar because Kattar keeps that really bladed boxing stance, and that can make it a little harder to check kicks sometimes. So attacking the lead leg was a brilliant strategy, right? Especially because Kattar likes the low kick too, and he just took it away from him. He won the low kick game. I mean, it was beautiful. And as far as him adding new stuff, I would say the elbows were the biggest thing I noticed because when he was opening up with those hand combos against the cage, a lot of the time he'd throw the left hook to the body and then come over with an elbow, right? To where it's kind of a weird angle to throw a right hand. It's not quite going to connect right, but it's just a perfect angle for the elbow. And I saw him hit Kattar with that twice in the third round when Holloway opened up with that one really crazy combo everybody thought was going to stop him. But yeah, I thought it was a great fight for Max Holloway. I think we're seeing him continue to improve, and he's at this point in his career where he's in his physical prime, but he has the skills of a 40-year-old veteran. He's just hitting this crazy flow state every time he fights now, and I think we're only going to see that continue for him.
Cameron, what about you?
I'll still say I think technically Kattar's the better pure boxer. I think Holloway made that a kickboxing fight in the feet. I think he came in, he messed with the range of Kattar. Kattar wanted him in boxing range. I think Holloway messed with that. He had him in kicking range a lot of the time, was hitting away at the legs, and then he'd kind of pop into the pocket and then hop right back out again. Yes. I think Kattar really struggles with that. I think the real reason Holloway was able to kind of style on him that much is because of how heavy Kattar is in his boxing. I think the whole game for Holloway was just keep it in kicking range and then get in and out quickly. Don't stay in the pocket. And the one time he did was when he, fired off on him in the fourth round and just about stopped him. But I've never seen Max Holloway fight like that, ever. Everything that he had from the kicks to never seen Holloway throw him stepping elbows or anything like that. To see Holloway, not come out and try and box somebody, because I think the Holloway that fought, up until I'd say Pettis, until he really, really fell in love with his hands. Holloway, in my opinion, was one of the most complete strikers in that division. And you've seen from the Pettis fight, the Aldo fights. I think the Aldo fight was maybe a specific. He didn't want to come out and kick a kicker, and then from then on, it kind of felt like Holloway forgot that he knew how to kick. And then the second Volkanovski fight, we've seen the kicks come back out, and he had success with them. The first Volkanovski fight, I think we've seen some come out after he got kicked, but I just feel like Holloway Holloway should have been using kicks, elbows, everything before now, and I agree with Nick when he said he's like a 40-year-old veteran that, he's had so many fights and so much, experience at this young age. Holloway, I think he's got, another 3 or 4 years still until he's in his prime.
Elaborating on your point, I will agree with your sentiment that he's the better pure boxer, but only on one condition, though. He is the better pure boxer offensively, but defensively, I believe it is all Holloway. I mean, those slips, he put him in the matrix, and that is the definition of what I said earlier, of the footwork combined with the head movement, and you were almost impossible to hit, and that's what we saw. Like Cameron said, the darting in, throwing that combo, landing his strikes, getting back out of range, maybe throwing a kick, switching it up. he was just too hard to hit. And when he was in Kattar's range, he wasn't getting hit because he was slipping. He was just dodging all of the punches. He was getting hit. He did take some of Calvin's best shots. And all I've got to say before we move on very quickly and give our picks for Stipe and Francis is that I think Kattar's stocks went up in that fight instead of going down. I think he kind of like Hooker and Poirier. Hooker lost that fight, but I think he really improved his status in the UFC with that loss, which is weird. But we want to give our picks for Francis and Stipe, or are we trying to wrap up?
When is Francis and Stipe? Quickly.
UFC 260. I don't know the exact date, but UFC 260 sometime in March. I want to say the 20th something.
Quick, we'll do quick 10 seconds each, right? Nick, you go first.
Okay, Stipe. I got Stipe in that fight. More complete, and he's in the best shape than he's ever been. No disrespect to Francis, but Stipe is my pick.
I've got Francis. I think Stipe is the better fighter, but I just don't think anyone can take Francis's shots. In 25 minutes, he's going to hit him once.
Stipe is going to put on another big performance. He's going to put the beast down. It's going to be like David and Goliath all over again. And DC said it best after their fight. If Stipe takes the time off and rests that chin, he can beat Francis. But if he hops into that fight too quickly, which he didn't do because this is still months away, then I think his chin will be recovered enough to win that battle and take those shots again. I got Stipe by decision or ground and pound TKO. Let's go. That's the Overtime Heroics podcast, boys and girls. Hope you guys had a great time, and we'll catch you on Tuesday. See ya.
Thanks for joining.